Honorable Mike Penders, I think he has to leave for some other important meeting, so I would request Mr. Dr. Penders to please come on the stage and, I mean, it's up to you if you want to stay there.
I think it's okay.
It's just going to be inconvenient to... There's another one? That's good. I'll keep this one. Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for those initial overview and summary. Very helpful. I'm Mike Penders, and even though I used to work for the government as a prosecutor and a lawyer at the Environmental Protection Agency, I just want to make clear that I do not represent a formal government position in my remarks today. Rather, my remarks are as a private citizen, as an international lawyer. I need to clarify that because we work with government agencies and organizations like NATO in areas of environmental security, but my views do not necessarily reflect those of the government and other institutions. Rather, I'm simply a country lawyer from Virginia, which has had some notable lawyers before, including Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who really stood for human rights, the first Declaration of Independence and universal human rights. And I think that is an important point that the chairman makes eloquently, the rights of particularly indigenous people, the right to sustainable development of natural resources of their own territory. And I just want to, I think this is a very important time in the geopolitical context of the security relationships of the United States and the region, particularly with respect to Pakistan and China and India. And I think this week, is a time when the United States is reevaluating its relationships and its support for organizations, governmental or otherwise. And the United States, on a level of principle and theory, certainly supports the rights, the universal human rights that are represented by the chairman, particularly as expressed in a democratic form of government, and that's the only legitimate form of government that the United States recognizes, even though for practical and other matters, you have to support many different people. But I think right now, in fact, this week in Congress, in the United States, there are hearings where we're evaluating the support, the security support that's provided to Pakistan in particular, and questioning whether that should continue and on what terms it should continue, or maybe that support should go to other places. So it's a very timely opportunity to consider these issues, and it's a privilege to do so here in Brussels. And I just want to make a couple of other points that gauge on the rule of law. This is also the 100th anniversary of the creation of national parks in the United States. President Teddy Roosevelt created vast, beautiful areas, not unlike Gilgit Baltistan, and created national parks the first time this had happened. None of the resources can be exploited there. And beautiful places like Yellowstone and Yosemite are national parks in the United States. So this marks the 100th anniversary to that. And there's also, in recent years, in several countries and many states in the United States, been recognized a constitutional right to the environment, that citizens have some sort of a constitutional right to the environment. And I think that's recognized in national law, and there's strong environmental laws, at least on the books, in countries like China, India, Pakistan. But it's the application of these laws, whether they're actually enforced, and whether the protections that are provided under these laws, whether they're extended to territories that they may control, But whether the protection of these laws are actually provided in practice to indigenous peoples. It's an issue all over the world, the rights of indigenous people under the forms of government that they are subject to. And in the United States, it's been a profound issue for some 200 years. The Native Americans, the rights of Native Americans in the U.S. Versus the rights of citizens. It's a complicated area, but it's always been understood that there's a special status for indigenous people, and that they have a right, a fundamental right, to the land on some level. And so I think it's a very good opportunity to reconsider, to elevate these issues, to recognize, raise the awareness of the issues in this region, and to recognize people who have stood for universal human rights, the rights of indigenous people, the sustainable development of resources, or at a minimum, to have a seat at the table for indigenous people when decisions are made about development and projects, to be represented in the process of development. And there's a very fundamental principle in environmental laws that you have to have everybody who's a stakeholder or maybe impacted at the table in making decisions. Otherwise, it's not a legitimate decision, and you have to analyze the environmental impact of any project, particularly to the people who may be impacted most by that project. You have to have a seat at the table. It's a fundamental principle under the fundamental environmental laws. It's called an environmental impact assessment, an environmental impact statement. Before any road is built in the United States or many parts of the world, before any dam in particular is built, you have to do an analysis of all the risks and the environmental impact to the natural habitat, to people, and now, not least, from security risks, right? Safety, security risks to the population. You have to take this into account in your planning and development. So I think at a minimum, the people, the indigenous people, have to be at the table when important decisions are made. And they may support the development of infrastructure, but it's their decision to weigh the costs and benefits and to have a voice at the table. So I think, that is not, I think that is something that may be realized in the short term, just to recognize, have international organizations that can effectively provide a voice, a way to communicate on behalf of people who may not be represented in their own country. So I think there's an interesting group of people here, and it's been a pleasure to be part of the proceedings yesterday and today. And I look forward to working with the organizations and institutions here to make sure voices are heard, including people who may be the Thomas Jefferson of that region. So I'm happy to be here and look forward to working with you, with your organizations, to elevate these issues and to see if we can't get a voice at the table where important decisions are being made in planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Penders. You mentioned about the right of the indigenous people over their land and resources, and I think it's a very important issue, and that's what the people of Gilgit Baltistan are being challenged nowadays, especially with different interventions from Pakistan and China. And you remind me of there was a metro line that government of DC wanted to start in Georgetown. And when the local people in Georgetown, they said, we do not want any metro here, they had to show respect to their decisions, and they had to pull off the project, withdraw the project. So the right of the local people to decide what is good for them, what is not beneficial for them, is more important. It should not be imposed from any other community, especially the occupying regimes. So I think this is something that really important that you mentioned. And yes, networking with different organizations, for organizations like BNF or any other organization, Gilgit Baltistan, is very important. And I think we're all looking forward to enjoy and benefit from these networks and coordinated efforts. My next, Andrew, very important